Hello there once again, and welcome to the Film Buffet Podcast. As always, I'm your resident film buff, Tom, and with me again on the second episode is BEyondDaBliz.
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
So glad to have you here with me once again. Little late, early, however you want to look at this for the second episode. Here we are in the second episode, and we're already screwing up, but no, just kidding. No, we had that special. I hope you guys get a chance to listen to that. If not, we'll have the link down below, but a lot to get into today. I'm going to let Beyond start with his feelings on some of the latest news he wanted to talk about right off the bat.
Yeah, so I've been hearing some new stuff about Wonder Woman from some of the critics, and I'm actually starting to see some positive stuff come out, which is actually a little bit surprising, just because, you know, the way it's been marketed, you know, of course, we talked about it, how we feel about it for so long. So it's kind of weird how, you know, some critics are saying it's good, some saying it's really good, but I'm still trying to reserve my judgment until I actually see the film myself to really know for sure. I think I saw a couple tweets, especially one from Steve Weintraub. I think he's the head of Collider, I believe, and he had said it's really good.
I believe he is. Yeah.
Maybe you know, Wonder Woman will come out and it's great. You know, we don't know yet. Again, you know, one of the things I started thinking about is kind of how sometimes there is a difference between critic and audience scores. So it's going to be interesting to see how that turns out, especially because it still is got a couple weeks out. You know, because I remember a movie I can think of in retrospect was something like The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where a lot of the fans, you know, really, you know, wasn't too happy with the movie, but the critics, you know, for the most part, actually gave a pretty good review. So it's going to be interesting to see, is it going to go that way, or is it this thing going to actually be a surprise hit? Who knows? And I'm, you know, like I said, if it turns out great, then that's good on DC. You know, that's good that they can finally get something right at least once, because then what'll happen is that they can, like we were saying before, if it does succeed, they can use this as a launching pad to try to fix sort of the way they've been going in the ways of Snyder and kind of the other stuff. Not just Snyder, I don't want to blame just him, but just kind of a lot of the studio decisions up until this point it's been very hit or miss, very reactionary, and we're starting to see the repercussions. So maybe they're turning around. I'm still reserved judgment, but you know, we'll see. We'll have to see.
Right. I think it's like a half and half thing. I think it's half Snyder. I think it's half DC and WB. They should have known from the start with all the problems they had with Man of Steel, and especially after Batman v Superman. I think they should have got the ball rolling a little quicker then, even though they kind of did. And we noticed that they're very reactionary. And of course, what we're talking about here, just for a little context, I think you might have mentioned it, but there was a screening this last week here for Wonder Woman, and there was a bunch of stuff that come out of that. And then also there's been a lot of talk about Justice League in the news the last week or so here because of reshoots and something Diane Lane said. And this is all stuff we're going to get into, including a little bit of Aquaman news. Here we are, just roughly less than 2 weeks out from Wonder Woman premiering. I still haven't seen much of a campaign. I've only heard of a few spots on regular TV. I've heard of some of the cable spots that they already bragged about spending $3 million on. But really, I still have yet to see a big push for this film, and they're all over the place with their estimates. But how do you feel about the campaign so far? I mean, here we are still another 2 weeks out, and what we have seen so far I feel was very reactionary, and otherwise they just really haven't. I don't think they had much of a plan set for this film. I really don't.
Right. Yeah, at least as far as what I'm seeing now. Again, I'm seeing tweets. I see tweets from people I know, like Umberto, you know, El Mayambe, who works for Heroic Hollywood. He said he really enjoyed the film. You know, which is good. Like I said, if they enjoyed the film, that's wonderful. These are a lot more critics that I do know, or people that are in this industry more so than what we saw with something like Fantastic Four, where it's kind of like a handful of people, even like with Green Lantern. So maybe that's a good thing. You know, maybe there is a chance that it could be good.
Right. We're seeing a few more positive tweets than we did for those, I guess. But that's the scary part, is there is absolutely zero negative tweets. Not one. And I mean, it'd be one thing if they were all one way or the other, you know, yeah, we get that. But it just seems odd.
In a sense, yeah. I think that should bring up a good point, because I remember before we talked about the earliest going to happen in February, where to me that felt like a legitimate screening where you had some people that liked it, some people not so much, but it felt more balanced and it felt more real.
Right.
Whereas this one, again, all of them could like the movie. Now, it's very well possible. However, they are kind of, it still is kind of obscene, the same thing where it's kind of like, it's all praise, everything's great, everything's great. Where, and that very well be the case. Yeah. And I'll give them the benefit of the doubt for that. However, I still can't say that until I've seen the film, or until I see more critics see the film. Because I think I've seen this before, where I remember when I'll give you another example, when Power Rangers came out, there were a pretty good amount of critics that really praised the film. I remember, like, one critic in particular, Perry Nemiroff, she was like foaming at the mouth at how much she loved the film. She works for Collider and Collider Videos. There were a good considerable amount of people that did like it, but audiences not so much. But you did see a lot of people that did, from the critic side. So we're seeing a lot of positive stuff, and the very moment could be true. I still have my reservations.
Right, I have high hopes for the film, and I keep teetering back and forth. It's like for every good TV spot we get one that's just like all the old. And we're getting a little bit more tidbits here and there. I mean, we don't want a ton. Don't get me wrong. I don't want the movie getting, spoiled like Batman v Superman was. Not that that was much of a spoil. That was just basically a red flag. I have higher hopes for this one. I think it's going to do well critically. I think it's going to do I think it's going to fare a little bit better with the audience, because I don't think there's that expectation there. I think, like I said before in your podcast about this whole situation, where I said it there, where I said, there's nothing to really compare it to. You don't have a prior Batman, 2 or 3 Batmans to compare to, like, or you don't have a bunch of Wonder Woman to compare to like Batman does or Superman does. She's only been here once. This is the first movie she's ever had, and it's not fair to kind of compare her to Linda Carter, who was 40 years removed. It'd be like trying to compare Ben Affleck to Adam West. Just kind of pointless. So I mean, I have a feeling that part's going to help her be more well received in the long run as far as the movie itself. Her as an actress, Gal Gadot, that's where my worries all really lie in right now. And I from what I'm hearing, from what we heard from Amy Theus the other night, and I'm sure what you heard from a lot of other women, is they don't like her in the role. And 90% of what I'm hearing, not just from men and women, is just the whole thing is like Gal Gadot is, everybody's like, this is just what I'm worried about. And I share, I think you share that too. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and again, I hear the same thing too, where it's not really getting people on board now. As I'm looking at the tweets, I'm looking at them right now as we're speaking, and like I said, all of them are extremely positive. They're like basically, saying this is like the best thing ever, best thing since sliced bread.
Which was a lot of the same stuff we were hearing out of Batman v Superman, right, to be fair, too. Right.
True. Now, the difference with this is that they are more critics I do know, which is something, because it makes me believe it a little bit more than if it would just be some random person that I never heard of before that's saying it. I don't know what it is, but there's something that still is like making me wonder, because like I really contemplate, will the audience accept it like the critics are? Because like you just mentioned, we're at the Gal Gadot. With the audience, they're not really on. This seems like they're really on board as far as outside of the nerdy, sweaty nerds circles. Like again, I've talked to people in my own family, people outside, that they're not really into it too much. So I don't know. I mean, I know we touched on this before, but that's really all I really like to say. Really, I mean,
something I guess we probably didn't really touch on because it just happened here recently. Is we seen that they're really trying to push it in China, and something.
I think they're doing a botched job with that, to be honest with you.
Love it or hate what they're doing so far. I'm sure I'll throw some, graphics up here that what we're talking about, like the poster that came out recently and whatnot.
It looks like an anime. It doesn't even look like the actual live action
interesting. I'd love to see that cartoon movie, but this doesn't represent this movie in the least. So, and I hear that they're not really picking up on it over there. Is kind of the general impression that I'm getting from that.
I'm not surprised, because I just looked at the numbers, and I think Power Rangers did like 1.1 million overall in China, which is horrific.
And I'm curious.
I don't think really China's really going to do anything for this film.
I'm right. And I'm curious how well BVS played over there. I guess I'd have to look that up real quick, but
yeah, it probably did much better.
Well, yeah, but that's just it. Batman can print money. Everybody knows who Batman is, and that's one thing we did touch on in the other podcast. Is specifically, what other countries are really going to be into Wonder Woman?
Europe is pretty much free game. I think Australia is free game. I think countries like that, like the major countries, I think it's pretty much fair game. I don't think there's really going to play too much into it. Yeah. But I think it's more of the brand recognition of the character itself. Where, again, like everyone around the world knows Superman and Batman, but not so much around the world with Superman, with Wonder Woman, where Wonder Woman, like you said before, it's more of an American, more of a well-known American hero.
I mean, and that's kind of what I was going to get to too, is that just as a character in general, it's one thing in China, like in places like China where Wonder Woman isn't well known around the world. I mean, I'd argue that probably Captain America is probably even more well known around the world than Wonder Woman is. And that's saying a lot because he is a more regional character to the point where they even have other versions of Captain America in other countries.
Right, and the point where I remember where anytime that they would have Captain America, any of his movies, they change it from Captain America to the First Avenger.
Yeah.
And even then, people still know who he is.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. Even though in a lot of these places they had their own versions, they just opened it up as the First Avenger, and they got it, and they knew who he was still, and the character played fairly well. And I have a feeling, and that's what they're kind of getting to, is they think, oh, this is going to play about as well as Thor and Captain America, and we touched on that too, and I think that's probably about where it's going to go, unless the movie is a lot better than we know. Those reshoots could have fixed a lot. Right now, with the quiet, though, out of this so-called, just to get back to what we were talking about here at first, this so-called press screening, because that's what they keep calling it, even though at first it was called the gold ticket screening. So that's where we were questioning is how much it was actually for the press and how much it was actually for fans. And now it's actually sounding more and more like it was a press screening.
Right. Now, again, I've seen people with the tweets. Now, again, there's some critics that I've seen that like this again, that said they like it, like Steve Weintraub, BEyondDaBliz, a few others. I think I saw one from Jermaine Lucier. I think I'm mispronouncing his name. I apologize.
Still not big names though, but a few of them, I do recognize. But like you said, once we got going, we found some.
There's a handful that seem to say they like it. Again, I'm just preface this with saying this could very much be a movie that's great, but again, until I see more critics, like a more plethora, like at least maybe, let's say 30 critics overall that I can get an estimate from, I'm still going to keep my stuff reserved.
Me too.
Because again, I was saying before where you have this thing where it feels like, oh, if you like the movie, you can tweet about it. If you didn't, you can't tweet about it. Because I think there were some other critics, right? Remember you were saying before how
there was just a handful, and all they said was they saw it, and that was it. Nothing more. They
saw it, and they couldn't say anything.
Nope.
Right.
So does that mean, is that like a red flag to us that, okay, these are probably the critics that when their review does come out, it's going to be bad? And I mean, and you and I both know that a lot of people are going to wait till they hear from people like us, people they trust, people they know that don't have an agenda, don't have, a basis for opinion set within one side or the other. We are just fans and we pay for our tickets just like everybody else pretty much. So people on the internet generally wait for guys like us to say whether it's good or not, and trust us more so even so. So I think that's where the real testament is going to be how well it plays through Thursday night and Friday, and we've said this before, and then if we'll see how it goes Saturday. If guys like us like it, and fans and the audience seems to dig it, then it probably will play very well. Then those $100 million estimates are probably more in that ballpark. If, like we said before, if you guys like you and I come out and we say it sucks, or it's not nearly as good as we thought it could be, or it's just as bad as BVS, however you want to put it, we'll see it take a nosedive, and very well could possibly see something like Captain Underpants take the top spot in its place, and that would be just a disaster for Warner Brothers.
Now that's like a worst case scenario. I don't think that's going to happen. I
think
it's
neither.
But make money, but it's about the legs. How much legs is this movie going to have? Because you saw in week 2 with BVS where it just dropped the ball. It just tanked in week 2.
I want to say that was one of the biggest drops in history. Yeah, if I remember right.
Yeah, it was awful. And again, it was true that everybody wanted to see a solid opening weekend, and that was it. The second weekend was really, are you really going to sustain an audience? And clearly BVS wasn't able to do that. With Wonder Woman's case, week 2 is really going to be the defining factor, because we even see with Guardians of the Galaxy, that movie has pretty great legs. Wait a minute, I'm seeing something. Wait, I saw something. Amethyst, our friend Amethyst gave us a tweet. She is this guy named Silas Lesnick, and this guy saying, very pleased to report that Wonder Woman is the best DC movie since The Dark Knight.
Ooh, that's some big shoes.
That's a bold claim, buddy.
That's very bold. very bold claim. Wow.
I just got flashbacks of that one chick saying, Ghostbusters 2016 is better than the original.
And funnier, and scarier, and all that crap. And that's just it. It's like, how much, we can't trust any of this. And just to kind of move along past this a little bit and move on to the next thing we kind of wanted to talk about was, Wonder Woman had a bunch of reshoots in November, and now we're hearing about some more reshoots for Justice League, which, of course, we'll say up front, is not abnormal. These movies, especially big ones, plan on it. There's a general feeling going around that they're fixing it again.
Yeah, and also, too, I was going to mention as well, now, this, I think Warner Bros. That came out say this didn't happen because there was scheduling, conflicts that didn't line up, and that very well could be true. I wouldn't put it past them to do it, though, at this point. I mean, we're only a couple months out, like about 6 months out, 5 months, 6 months out from Justice League actually coming out, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did it. And it goes back to this thing where there's this erratic sense of, like I said, this reactionary, listen, we're going to do this thing and that thing, and it gets like you're trying to be like an octopus trying to do all these things at once, trying to fix everything, instead of having a cohesive structure really to go and have a basis to really evolve from. Now, like I said, this can very well not have actually happened. This could be like a fake news story that didn't happen. But let's say for a minute it does. Let's say for a minute it is true.
Right.
If it is true, this says to me that Justice League is a hot mess, if it is true, and that they don't really know how to structure the movie properly. It feels like, again, BVS Part 2. Too much cooks in the kitchen, too many subplots that go nowhere, and things aren't really connecting together.
And that's the rumors that we're hearing, too, and that's the rumors we've been hearing. And then this, of course, is right on the heels of probably one of the worst things for a publicity department to happen when... Here, I'll just show you guys the clip real quick, and then we'll talk about it when we come back.
Let's go to the phones. Caller, what's your name and from where are you calling?
Hi, Andy. This is Brooke from St. Louis.
Hey, Brooke from my hometown. What's your question?
I have a question for Diane. Can you give us any Justice League spoilers? And do you think it'll be better than the Avengers?
Oh, good Lord.
No and no.
No and no. Very good.
Short but honest. I hate to disappoint, but
So, okay, that was Diane Lane, and she was on a talk show, and she specifically answered a question that came into her, and I'm sure you guys have seen this video if you haven't seen it before, but I just wanted to show it for context. Now, this, to me, sounds like a very honest answer to a very simple question. Am I wrong?
I've seen people like Collider videos come out and say, oh, well, this was a gracious thing. It was a gracious thing she was saying. She was trying to be humble. I don't buy that bullcrap.
Well, not only that, they're using the excuse, and this is basically what her publicist, and this is another thing. Everybody keeps saying that Diane Lane came out and retracted her statement and made a statement. No, her publicist, everyone I've seen, I have yet to see one that claims to be a direct quote from Diane Lane. They all say that she was misquoted and misunderstood, and this is the same thing that they're all falling back on, is she cannot talk about it. That's what she meant. I'm crying bullshit on that. I don't know about you. I mean, obviously you too, but I mean, I just don't buy it. I feel she was being honest up front, and I feel now they're trying to play damage control, and it's nice to finally see WB take some initiative if that's the facts. Is it too little too late, and is it really just making things worse in the long run? Or
it is the fact that they keep having to retract stuff so much and have to clarify and clarify and clarify and clarify. It does make you think, because it's like the fact that they were so quick to do it, and again, the context of which she was asked the question, all she had to do was say, I can't say anything, and leave it at that. That's
right, and she said nothing like that. No, she directly answered the questions, and I take it for face value in this case. She was asked if Justice League was going to be better than Avengers. She said no, and she said sorry to disappoint. You don't say those kind of things. The way she said it does not sound anything remotely close to I can't talk about it, like you just said. It'd be one thing if she flat out said a statement like that. I'd buy that, whatever, because that's typical of these situations. Nothing new, nothing more, nothing less. But when she said the way she answered it, and I think I said this to you more in private, or I might have said it in the other podcast when we brought it up a little bit, she obviously seemed like she had had a few to drink. Because when these people go on these talk shows, and I guess this this talk show host is very notorious for getting people to open up and say things like this. So I have a feeling they got quite a booze selection in the green room.
Yeah, probably do. Yeah.
I'm thinking she seemed a little tipsy. She didn't seem drunk, but she seemed a little tipsy to where the question kind of caught her off guard to a point, but she took a second, thought about her answer, she answered it, seemed to me honestly, bluntly but honestly, and that's what she said, I mean, it doesn't bode well for these guys right now when you can't even get people involved out there to talk positively about it. And the fact of, like, just to go back to, like, what's happened to Ben Affleck with this whole situation in the last few weeks, I'm getting to the point, or months actually, I'm getting to the point where I start to wonder how much was really his choice and how much was really WB being a jerk to him about the whole situation. I mean,
I think it's really more of WB. Again, they're like, oh, this didn't work, so damage control, and they can start kind of
very panicky,
going off and start chickens with their head cut off. They can start tail between their legs. We keep seeing that more and more. Even with, and look at an example, King Arthur. Well, King Arthur was actually interesting. I'm very curious to see if Wonder Woman ends up doing what King Arthur did. And now follow me on this one. It's a very interesting theory I have.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's going to be a critically commercial flop like King Arthur per se. I'm not saying that, but just in the context where we saw where the marketing wasn't really that good for King Arthur, then kind of last minute they started trying to really push it more and more. I saw, but then it's more like it's kind of in the same mode where it's kind of like an old school fantasy type of film, but it didn't really even resonate with audience at all. But I saw that there were a good amount. Actually, no, it was in reverse, where the critics didn't like it, but the audience did, but it still didn't do well.
Right.
And it's kind of interesting where I feel like could the same thing happen here, where maybe a lot of the critics like it, but maybe the audience don't, not so much. And it ends up kind of being mixed overall. I don't know. I guess I wanted to throw that out there because I know it's a Warner Brothers picture.
Well,
I know it's a different type of movie, but it kind of has a similar kind of feel to it in the way it's being presented.
You have two sides to this one, of course. You have a completely different, as far as like Wonder Woman, it'd be different if we've had, 7 Wonder Women up to this point. King Arthur is just like Robin Hood. All these movies that every year they do a Hercules, a Robin Hood, one of these classic old, completely free characters that anybody can use. And when was the last time, other than I think that Tarzan movie here a little while back hit? Otherwise, it's been since Kevin Costner's Robin Hood?
Yeah, I don't think even Tarzan, the one you're talking about, the one that came out recently, I don't think that did that well either.
I think it did okay, but I don't think it did as bad as somebody. But other than Disney's Tarzans, I'm hard pressed to think clear back to Greystoke. And these characters
or even Pan,
right?
Like
oh God, another great example.
That was a total train wreck.
Even though that's not public domain, it's still a great example of how Hollywood likes to take these characters. And superheroes are kind of the next thing of those. And then hopefully they don't beat them into the ground like they did these other characters, because like I said, we've seen how many different Robin Hoods, we've seen how many different Peter Pans, like you just said, and how often can they keep redoing it over and over and over again to where you get to a point where you've gotten to generations so far past them that they don't give a crap. You get a perfect situation like the Lone Ranger. Who the hell knows who the Lone Ranger is who's not rolling around in a nursing home? Seriously. I mean, nothing against the character. It's just kids nowadays have no clue who he is and don't care. He's so far out of, be blunt about it. He's way out of date. I can't even see him trying to do Dick Tracy now. Another situation where just a character that's way past its prime, and it just, unless you do something drastic with it, I don't see anything coming of it, to where that's where King Arthur, I think they kind of knew what they had, and I think you could be right, and we could have a similar situation. Is like you said, we have very similar advertising to this point for King Arthur. We had a really lukewarm to very negative response to the film. It didn't make anything at the box office at all this last weekend, that they're figuring they're going to lose about $150 million on it. And when you're talking about losing that kind of money, that's bad. Heads are going to roll. There's going to be some people who are, if they haven't already cleared out their desks, probably will be within the next couple weeks here. And if the same thing kind of happens with Wonder Woman, like you said, it's definitely not going to open at 14 million. Don't get me wrong. It's going to do more like, if it does anything below 60, you and I have both said this several times, it's done.
Which I don't think it will per se, but there's a chance. You never know.
You never know. And you're right about that, especially if word of mouth gets around that it's horrible or something like that on Thursday night, after those first previews. Yeah. And especially when the embargo lifts, and if there's a lot of critics, especially ones that people do respect and trust, if a lot of them come out and say it's crap.
Yeah, or like more, because like I said, like an example example I'll give you, and I want to mention this. Let's get into this a little bit. Do you think that, I won't say this is going to play too much into it, but it could. Do you think that maybe there could be an agenda at play? I'm not trying to say that's universal, but that there could be a little like maybe a few critics here or there that, you know, I've seen some from stuff like BuzzFeed and stuff like that. And of course, they lean a certain point of view, you know, on the spectrum. Do you think that perhaps maybe they could try to shield the movie because it has a female protagonist because they want to push a certain agenda? Do you think that may play a factor? I don't think that's going to be a huge factor, but that can have some resonance.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was actually right where I was going to move into, and that's what I was going to say is you have a situation, I think, that's going to be very similar to Ghostbusters, where you're going to...
people just pretend to like the film.
Just because they are afraid of the backlash of saying that it sucks. Now, if this was 10, 15 years ago in the age of Catwoman, no problem. You'd have no issues with a critic coming out and saying it sucked, if they felt that way. But I think you're right. I think there is a possibility you're going to have, with a few at least, I know somebody you brought up quite a few times.
Sasha Pereva?
Yep, that's where she blatantly flat out said, you know, I can't, basically in so many words, speak negative about Ghostbusters because of my agenda.
Feminism precludes me. The quote is, my feminism precludes me from rooting against this film.
Right, and that's just it. It's like, I have a feeling that you're going to get that. And even though I don't agree with him 100% of the time, maybe not even 80% of the time, Richard Roeper is one of the oldest and most well-trusted in my eyes as far as critics go. And if he comes out, if he comes out and he really trashes the movie, then I'll know it's shit. But if he comes out and says, it's better than BVS, we'll have a little hope going into it, because we know at least it's not a convoluted mess and it probably makes sense. I mean, that's basically the best we can hope for at this point, and that's sad to say, but I do think you're right. Just to bring it back around, I have a feeling that we are going to see at least a few, if not maybe even quite a few critics who are just going to have a hard time giving it a negative review simply because it does have a female protagonist as the lead, and I think that's going to affect it a little bit, especially considering who it is, you know.
Right. And you have a female director and all that stuff, and I think there is some politics at play. I really do think so. Now, we want to say again, we want to clarify, we don't think that all critics are going to say this. There's a lot of critics out there that are, you know, perfectly fine, and they can separate, you know, their own personal opinions from a movie, and that's great, and that's what you need in an industry like this. But it just becomes troubling, because I've seen this more and more where it has started to change, where people are starting to go more and more lean towards interjecting their own opinions and their own ideologies into their reviews. And it's really starting to really scare me a little bit. But that's more of an overall statement for the entire critic space, critic community, critic community, and
I try.
That's a whole other topic.
And I mean, I do a lot of reviews and I try to stay as objective as possible. And I mean, there's been plenty of times where I'll give a fairly decent review to something that I personally didn't like, or vice versa, will give something that I personally like a little bit more of a negative review, just because I know that just because I enjoyed something or didn't enjoy something at a certain level doesn't mean that it doesn't, you know, resonate for somebody else. You know, I'm not expected to go in and see a movie like Secret Life of Pets and enjoy it necessarily. They are kind of, you know, playing to two different audiences there, and I get that. And that's where I would review it from and say, okay, this movie is just basically a ripoff of Toy Story, but kids are going to enjoy it. You know, there's that kind of a thing. You know what I mean? As far as an adult going in, you're probably not going to enjoy it, but the kids are going to love it. You know, you can go at a movie like that. Then there's the way that a lot of these critics, and this is what you're saying, is where they come in and it's like, I love this movie, so I'm going to give it a glowing review no matter what. And I've even had to go back and in my, you know, in the time that from just being a normal film viewer, and when I was working in the, you know, video industry and stuff like that, when I was on that side of it, as opposed to when I was on the other side of it, and I decided to start writing reviews and stuff online about, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago or more, you know, then I had to really kind of change my view on some things, and I even had to go back on the IMDb and kind of rethink some of my scores. And even now when I review movies, sometimes I have to go back and relook at my score and say, well, is that something that I gave it that much better or worse of a score because of something personal? And I think you're going to get that a lot here. And to move along a little bit, unless there was anything else you wanted to say about that subject.
There was one thing I wanted to say. I have noticed a couple of people from our group on Midnight's Edge. A lot of them are kind of saying that it seems like it seems a little bit chillish. I don't know. That's not a word, but it's kind of like some critic. Again, this thing where it seems very on the nose. And like I said, it could be true.
Right.
Not negating that. It just... And
they can't blame us for feeling this way, though. And they can't, because we've... Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I mean, we've done it 3 times now with DC. And You know, all three films in one way or another were polarizing with the fans. Regardless of how you may feel personally, or I may feel personally, or anybody feels personally, there isn't a single person out there who cannot at least sit down and admit, yes, there is something fundamentally wrong here if you've got this much of a schism between two different groups and how they feel about these movies compared to, you know, other ones in the past, and the ones that, not to bring them up and bring them in, but the way Marvel has been handling their product in the last 10 years. But that doesn't go to say Marvel had sucked up until they got Marvel Studios up and going. So just to, you know, kind of even out the playing field there so we don't get attacked, we're just simply saying nobody can blame anybody for being just the least bit worried about how this movie is going to play, and especially the next one down the line, which is what I wanted to get to here, which is kind of the big topic lately anyway, considering we're already moving past Wonder Woman and it isn't even out yet. But so not just Justice League, but even farther down the line, Aquaman. How is this going to affect Aquaman? And I know you were actually happy to see this picture I'll throw up here of James Wan just released it today. It was of Mira, played by Amber Heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she looks good,
right? Besides just being good to look at, it does look good, not just good to look at, but there's color. It doesn't feel like Zack Snyder.
I mean, like I remember the picture they had of Mira before, where I'm like, did I enter like a Tim Burton movie? And I love Tim Burton movies, but like it's like everything is all gray and there's no color.
And that's the problem.
It's all depressing.
Not every one of these characters is Batman. And unfortunately, WB made so many waves for so long with Batman. I think they got in this mentality that just do it like that, you know? And first, for a while, it was Tim Burton. And it was like, just do it like that. Even the Flash series that came out on TV right after the original Burton Batman suffered from that. I mean, for all the decent, corny qualities it had, however you want to look at it, it had Danny Elfman doing the theme. It was shot just like Batman, even though the Flash was bright and flashy. You know, they even made Mark Hamill. I mean, basically the basis for the Joker, Mark Hamill's Joker, is in the Trickster in the original Flash. So I mean, it's like you can see that movie influenced. And then when the Nolan Batmans came in, it was like that influenced everything after that. You know, and the only ones who seemed to kind of go their own way once again was Marvel. But I think that's because they still you have to have that balance. And I think that's where DC is really having an issue right now, is that balance between not every character has to be dark and dreary and depressing and gray, and you know, the sea is a very open, wide place with a lot of colorful creatures. It would make sense that just because you don't want to make Aquaman all colorful and, you know, a little bit flashy like he was in the old versions, I get it. You want to darken the character up a little bit, but that doesn't mean it has to be so deep and dark and every character has to have no color whatsoever and look like their costume was made by the military. And it just, you know, I'm glad to see this. This actually looks like something straight out of a comic book. At least that's my vibe.
And here's the thing: it's comic book, but movie comic book. That's the perfect blend
right.
with Marvel. Where look at, like, for instance, Doctor Strange, perfect blend of a movie verse and a comic book verse, where it's practical, but it also looks like I can literally see someone redrawing it as a comic book form, and I can believe it.
Right.
It's a perfect transition. And again, with Mira, you know, not only is she super fine, but she looks like, actually objectively looks good. Like she looks good, like right. The way it's designed. There's color. It looks presentable. It looks believable.
The
it
green
doesn't look
really
like dark
pops
and
with the red hair, and
exactly.
She actually has skin tone.
Right, actually a skin tone. You can see it. Now, granted, this is a picture.
Yeah.
I think someone took it with their camera, not actually the camera they're using to film it with. So there very well could be some color correction. I hope not. I really hope not. They don't do that. They hope they just say, no, make it vibrant. Make it like literally like Thor underwater, you know, make it great, right. Vibrant, kind of like what they're doing with Thor Ragnarok, where everything's all vibrant now.
We're not talking Galaxy. We're not talking, you know, Finding Nemo vibrant, but we're talking, you know, like what I would expect to see it like an IMAX, you know, underwater. You know, those are vibrant and blue, and the fish are all different kind of colors, and the reefs and the different things underwater. It doesn't all have to be dark and dreary.
Right, and that's the best thing. There's a lot of ground this movie can make, because can you name me one superhero film that's underwater and that can be like basically like another version of space, where like there's so much unknown stuff we don't know about what's even on Earth beneath us. It's like a whole nother world beneath us. And if they're able to really, you know, use CGI in an effective way to really give us this world that really feels like it's special and unique, there's something that can be great. Like if there's a movie I can say that can save the DCEU potentially, it's Aquaman. I will say
well,
that.
I think that'll definitely. Well, I was just gonna say that would definitely prove something because Aquaman is one of those characters that has basically been a joke until the New 52. I mean, let's face it. You know it, and I know it. Everybody makes fun of Aquaman. I think you touched on something really important there. Is I think the reason that a lot of people got so excited about that little piece of footage that come out of Aquaman was because it not only looked good, but they're finally getting the right idea with this character and how to do it. Like you said, not to bring up the Marvel way again, but it's practicality in a realistic way, but at the same time still just hanging on to a little bit of fantasy and it just hitting all the right notes. And as long as they don't make it into this really dark and dingy, like if everything looks like that scene in BVS where we seen him in the camera, if everything looks like that, I'm going to be very depressed. So I mean, I'm not saying it has to be all sunny and vibrant and him, riding on dolphins or any shit like that. I'm just saying it's, it'd be nice to be able to see something in these movies for once and actually know what the frick is going on. Cause I mean, that's one of the biggest bitches I had about Batman v Superman is that you couldn't see anything. Since it had to be the most darkest, hardest to watch Batman movie since this first Tim Burton movie before they finally lightened up the prints because the people complained so much. I mean, it was literally dark to your eyes, dark, not just dark in
And one
general.
thing I wanted to mention too, Tom, is I studied the way the color correction, because I'm into film from a technical editing side. When I look at their color correction and the way they compose everything together, like actually when you break down the color palette, one thing I really can't stand, especially with the Flash, to give a perfect example, they have his energy as blue, which is a really big mistake because first of all, the Flash in the comics has yellow, and I feel like you're really taking away from the character's differentiation, away from everyone else, where he can really pop, especially with the juxtaposition of those two different color palettes where you have the background can be blue, but the fact that he's yellow, it can really pop out. He can really pop out of the screen. It feels like he's zipping by and all that stuff. Where when I saw him in the trailer, actually in motion, he just kind of blended into the background, and he didn't really stand out to me as much as I wanted him to. And I took away from the awe that I really could have felt if they would have went with yellow lightning and really color corrected it properly to really make him look very vibrant and good. You can still have it gritty, but you can have a nice little balance of both. Even with some of the other characters, like again Aquaman, like we were saying before, Aquaman, his suit looks like really gray. There's like a little bit of green. Like if you look at the promo art, there's more green you can see on there because it's like it's in the sun, like the sun is in the back of them. But when you see them in the movie practically in motion, it's that's not that much there.
They're going to lose all that in the color grading,
gray and brown. Yeah, it's really like frustrating to me because DC is has a lot of characters that you can really make them like when you see it in a screen, especially in IMAX, you're like, wow, that looks like they're because they're basically gods. A lot of the characters, and they're not really playing that up a lot, and it really takes away from the awe and the sophistication that DC really could have if they really were just to make these little tweaks and changes. Right, it would make it so much better. But again, when I say with Zach, I'll end with this. I'll end my piece with this, where he's the type of guy where he thinks, oh well, dark and gritty and edge equals cool, which is not how it works. It's a nuanced process, right? Knowing when or when not to use it.
And I think that's a good point, though, because, I mean, not that Zach has so much to do with Aquaman, but he does in Justice League, and that's what we've seen more of so far. And in that movie, he is just like all the other characters, dark and dingy. And as far as the Flash, just to go back a little bit on what you said, I think that the whole Flash thing has more to do with them not wanting to be confused too much with the TV show.
That's a possibility, yes.
And that is a good point, is he is a brighter character, and he shouldn't be so dingy and dark. And that's a good place for us to move on to the next thing I wanted to talk about, and because of the Flash moving forward even more, unless there was something else you wanted to add.
No, that's pretty much it about Aquaman. I say if there's any one movie, I really trust James Wan. I think he's really good with his horror movies. I know he's the one that did The Conjuring, right? Yeah, and I heard those movies always get critically acclaimed, so I think he has a lot of chops. Right. Let's just hope DC and Warner Brothers allows him to make a great film and doesn't shackle them.
And that's kind of where this part comes in once again. And this is another thing with DC and WB that's really starting to drive me nuts. They have announced now once again, or somebody did, or supposedly this is the rumor, that Robert Zemeckis is once again the front runner to direct Flash, which I have no issues with. Don't get me wrong on that. But he walked away before and took this other project that he's making next because he felt that WB would not let him have the carte blanche he would need to do this movie. And I can see that. He's already tied to a star. He's already tied to a specific storyline and other events that happened before or around or after. So I can see a director like Robert Zemeckis saying, I really don't want to make this Flash. I want to make my own Flash. A director like Robert Zemeckis or anybody like that, if they want to make a movie, you just let them do it and just let them do whatever the hell they want, and you work your way around it, if you ask me. But, you know, the other thing is, though, is Matthew Vaughn and Sam Raimi turned it down, and Matthew Vaughn, of course, is directing the Batman, and Sam Raimi would have been a very good choice. Another one like Robert Zemeckis, who would have had the right temperament for this, because I think that's one thing that they really, the only thing that they've touched on so far with the Flash that I think they've gotten right is that he is like their Spider-Man. He makes all the little quips, and he's the annoying one of the group sometimes when, you know, pestering the rest of the group and stuff like that, and kind of young and all that kind of stuff compared to the rest, and they've kind of got that going. But other than that, I don't like how the costume looks. Like you said, I don't like the lightning part of it, and I could see as a director, you know, just even those little things like that, like I said, even already being stuck with your lead actor can be very annoying sometimes, and Zemeckis of many directors would know that, because I'm sure if you're familiar with the story of Back to the Future, he was forced to start shooting the movie with a completely different actor because Michael J. Fox couldn't shoot it at the time they needed him to, and then when that didn't work out, they worked the schedule out to where they could get Michael J. Fox in there. So he's somebody who already knows what can happen when a production takes on the wrong, you know, actor, which Ezra Miller is fine so far, I guess, you know, not to take anything away from him in what we've seen, but do you think this guy can really carry a whole movie by himself? And do you really even think that we're going to get a Robert Zemeckis or somebody of that caliber in this universe?
I think one thing I do appreciate what DC is doing, they're going for talent. They're trying to go for Oscar winners. I saw some other people that they say that maybe they should get some new blood. I say DC needs all the help they can get right now, so getting Oscar winners isn't a bad thing. Yeah. As far as the Flash, his character, he seems pretty much the cookie cutter. I'm the nerdy guy, and I make little quips and jokes, and that's not my calculations. And I mean, like I said, and that's all fine and well. It could transfer well in the movies. You know, personally, Ezra Miller, I liked him in Perks of Being a Wallflower. I actually thought he was actually pretty great in that movie. Other than that, he seems fine as the Flash. I kind of like the suit. It's actually one of my favorite suits. I guess, again, the whole thing, I wish they really like fix it up a little bit.
I'll give it at least it's red. At least it's red, not like freaking really dark maroon or something like that.
It's not like that. Some like dark red colored, blood red or something like that. It's good they actually have it like pretty vibrant.
That's one of the few things I will say I don't care for in the TV show. Is I love everything pretty much about the TV show, even though I haven't gotten to see any of this last season here yet. I plan on binging on it, but that's, you know, neither here nor there. That's the only thing I really don't like about their costume is how dark red it is. It's not quite that poppy red, you know, which really looks good, like you said, with that red and yellow flash lightning. That would just look so cool, you know, on the big screen. And I think they are losing a lot of that with this, you know, just the way they're going with this character already. But I'm glad to hear that you like the costume. I mean, it's not horrible of all of them so far. Besides Batman, it's probably in Wonder Woman, which, because she's the one they changed the least, I guess. If you have to say, you know, if I have to step back and look at them all, her costume has gotten the least amount of changes other than just the dinging down of the color. But Flash just kind of, I guess until I see it in action, I got too much of that Tony Stark Iron Man vibe out of it, I guess, is what I'm kind of saying. But
yeah, a little bit. Even the same thing with the Power Rangers costumes having arc reactors. I'm just like, come on. Just come on. Hey, I just can't stand that when he gets to copy all the stuff that's come before. But anyway, try to touch a little bit more on Ezra Miller. Again, he's probably going to do okay. I think he may even be pretty decent. It may get a little vexing to have to hear him, you know, talk like this like the entire movie, and everything's about a quip and everything's If I hear that for an entire movie, I'm going to walk out. Like, I don't think they're going to do that, but there's a potential where they can make that he could very well be their Spider-Man.
This is another one of those characters to where, unlike Wonder Woman, unlike Aquaman, and more like Batman and Superman, you've had a few different Flashes to this point, and not to mention you already have one that's very prominent on TV. And I, to a point, share some sentiment about why didn't they just use Grant Gustin and just they already got him well established. Why not just give him his own movie and let him be part of this? I don't have an argument with that to a point, but at the same time, I understand they want to do their own thing. But at the same time, it seems to be at the expense of avoiding a lot of what's in the TV show. And at the same time, I also felt like the first 2 seasons of the TV show felt very handcuffed by DC, because I felt like a lot of times they were getting told from up above, you got to change this or you can't do that because we want to use that in the Flash movie. Because the first season started out, I don't know if you watched the show at all, but the first season started out with the very much heading towards the Flashpoint storyline, and then at the last minute it seemed like they kind of had to change a few things, and that came right on the heels of DC announcing at that time that was the storyline they were going to use for their Flash movie. And I think that's still going to be the basis at this point, but it sounds like they're more prepared to be open and accepting of somebody rewriting it once again. This is obviously going to push the movie way past their 2000. This is not coming out in 2018. It's not, and it's definitely probably not coming out in 2019. I think the earliest we'll see a Flash movie is 2020 at best.
I think it may not even happen at all. They just keep, delaying. Kind of like even with the Avatar sequels. I mean, I know James Cameron is one of the legendary directors of all time. He keeps saying pushback. Until I see a trailer, that movie's not happening. Right. In my mind.
And just to bring up another point of this, and this really kind of plays into that, is where you think it might not happen. Is there was another, again, here's what goes with Warner Brothers and their damage control and shit getting out there forever and not taking care of it right away. Word got out that supposedly Billy Crudup was not going to play Barry Allen's father in the film anymore, even though he's already in Justice League. And so that seemed to have everybody up in arms going, well, what's going to happen? Well, it turns out he's still attached, and that's probably because he's not. I think what came of that was as they basically come down and told him that they weren't going to shoot the movie in the frame that they had set aside for that. So he took something else, and somebody took that as he was going to do something else instead of the Flash. And they misinterpreted the fact that basically the Flash is up in the air at this point, like you just said. And who even knows if it's going to happen. So obviously,
and even we mentioned this before. I just want to say real quick, even in our other podcast, where is that Cyborg movie? Where did it go?
It got sucked up into Justice League.
No one's even talking about it.
It got sucked up into Justice League. I can tell from the trailer that he, like you said, I think you said it in the other podcast, is he's going to be their Black Panther, not because it's race related. Don't take me that way. In a sense that in Civil War, the Black Panther was the new character introduced. We got a lot of his story background in that movie instead of Black Panther solo movie. I think that's going to be the same thing here with Cyborg. We're going to get all his background in this movie, and depending on how well he's received and the movie's received, will completely negate whether or not we get a solo Cyborg movie or not. But obviously they already have him set up, so they have that plus side. The negative side is it's something else to take up room in the Justice League movie, and that's something they've had problems with so far, and that is too much
in the freaking kitchen. Again, that can really bring down a picture. If you just again, they keep doing the same thing. I'll say this. I think this is going back all the way to our first conversation about Wonder Woman. I again think Wonder Woman is going to be okay. I think it may be all right. Again, that may affect the box office either way, but I really think Justice League I still think Justice League is not good. I keep feeling like it's a mess.
I share
especially
that
from everything we're seeing, and it's following the same patterns, the same beats, the same thing as Batman v Superman. Action, quip, action, CGI. And it goes on and on and on. And I'm just like, and it's a very Snyder-esque trailer, especially the one we saw. And I don't care anymore. I simply do not care.
I share your feelings on that. And I know a lot of people, not a lot of people actually, just a few, especially on Midnight's Edge group, will pop in and say, you guys are just so negative about everything. Do you guys wish everything is going to fail or hope everything is going to fail? No. We want a good Justice League movie, but we've been bit in the ass already by Batman v Superman and some feel Man of Steel. So especially when it comes to a Snyder film, we're really freaking scared. And especially when it comes to Justice League, because this could be a colossal fuck up, because nobody thought he could fuck up Batman v Superman. It's worried that he could fuck this whole thing up even more. And this could just be a whole practice in stupidity when it all comes down to it, because if they did not change, depending on what they're changing, what they're shooting, and this is the other part that I wanted to get into about the reshoots, was the word used, and this is a word we don't generally hear unless there's a problem, extensive. You don't generally hear the word extensive reshoots unless we're talking about, I'm sure you could give me a few examples, Fantastic Four, Suicide Squad. You know, and the only times it ever usually works out in a good way is something like World War Z. But that's
or Rogue One. Rogue One is another great example.
Or Rogue One, yeah, and that's how many years between the two. You know, so it's very rarely when they do extensive.
It's a rare thing.
Extensive reshoots does it help the movie,
right? And here's the thing: I see people again, like for Collider. I remember seeing their video where they're saying, "Oh well, even if there was reshoots a day before, as long as the movie's good, that's fine." No, I completely disregard that mindset. I think that's completely short-sighted and just naive to think that way. Because again, if reshoots, yes, they are standard procedure. Yes, that is true. But when in the context, it's all about the context. Like even a friend Audrey over at Midnight's Edge, he was saying how he was very skeptical with the reshoots that had gone on with Rogue One. And I do think there was a point where Rogue One was a disaster.
Right, until we found the context out. And that was basically that the reshoots for Rogue One came in when they basically said, you know, this is a great movie, but everybody's got to die. And they're like, we didn't know you guys were going to let us do that. Do it. Because, I mean, a few characters die, but they made sure that a few characters lived is what I'm really getting at. And they said, no, you don't have to. You know, they're like, oh, well, cool. So and I think that's the whole thing that, you know, that's a different kind of reshoot. You know, same thing, and another good example with like Disney and same way is like the Marvel movies. 9 times out of 10 when they have a reshoot, it's just to beef up something or to film their credit scenes. And that's it. And that's generally because the other movie has started filming and, you know, it's the perfect timing. So when they use words like extensive, and when you're not hearing the story in like you do with Rogue One or World War Z, like I said, that's very few and far between where you have a situation where they are actually being helped by the reshoots. Suicide Squad shows its reshoots. Fantastic Four even Ghostbusters showed its reshoots real bad. And these are all movies that had the word extensive in front of the reshoots. And that's a very
I will say one thing with
flag.
Ghostbusters could have been a heck of a lot worse if they would have kept some of the stuff in there, like the dance sequence they put in ending and the end credits, and they put it in the extended cut. I'm
not arguing with that.
Like I said, that movie could have been a lot worse. It still was a bad film, but it could have been even worse than what we saw.
Right. No, but I'm just saying the point is you could tell. And at least with Rogue One and World War Z, those reshoots helped the story. They made them stronger. In this instance, you have a situation where I think you're right. It is a big red flag. They're scrambling to fix something. Something is not right. Either something that we as fans said something about during either one of the trailers, or something's not working at the end. It's very hard to say, or it shows me at least that they have a little bit of faith left in this movie to put the money into it. But at the same time, this is the typical thing when it comes to Hollywood, and when they freak out about movies like this. It's like, oh my God, it's not working. Throw some more money at it, you know. And that's the biggest big problem. And I mean, I can't imagine that they set aside that much money for extensive reshoots. I mean, that's what the question is how much are they spending on it now, and how much more is this going to tack onto the budget, and how much more of a mountain do they have to climb like BVS before they actually see the light, you know. And as much as they want to try and pretend that Batman v Superman made some kind of paltry profit, I don't see it. I think it's one of those times they're lying about it because they don't want it to be known that they did lose so much money on it. And a lot of people don't realize is they put every single penny of profit from Man of Steel into Batman v Superman as well. So they not only lost whatever profit they didn't make on Batman v Superman, they lost all the profit from Man of Steel that they put into it. They're playing a very dangerous game.
Yeah, they are. Like I said, if they can somehow turn it around, that's great for them, because they desperately need to fix the problems they're having with this universe. And again, if they're not able to do that, you know, audiences are even let's say, for instance, because people have been burned so much. Let's say Wonder Woman is amazing, but audiences don't catch on to it. That very well could happen with the critics, where they praise it, but the audience is like, whatever.
And that won't be the end of the world for them, though. But yeah.
But it's kind of just the concept of, because we've been spurned so much, are people just going to be like, hey, we've lost interest already?
That's very
It's kind of the same thing I've seen a couple times too, where I can't name any movies off the top of my head, but I've seen it where the second one sometimes is better than the first one, because the first one was so bad, people just didn't care. They just did because they were already checked out already. I don't know if you can think of any examples of that.
Generally not too often, because if the first movie doesn't play, they don't generally jump into another one. Honestly, the I guess probably the closest example I could come to, but it's a really bad one, would probably be like 50 Shades of Grey and 50 Shades Darker, because the first movie was so horrible, and I really don't know too many people who enjoyed it very much other than those diehard fans, but yet the second film still did fairly well. I don't think it did well critically or anything like that, but
oh no, it was completely banned.
Right. I just, it's one of those funky things where generally if your first movie doesn't play, you don't get a second one anymore, it seems like, and unless they're really vested in the long game. And I mean, I would say like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but the second one took a bigger dive than the first one. So, I mean, whether you liked it or not.
Yeah, that's kind of another example where I heard some people were saying it's actually not as bad as the first one. The first one was worse to them, but the second one was actually a little bit better, but it's still tanked.
See, now me as a major TMNT fan, it's really difficult to ask me because I hate both of them for two different reasons. And I mean, I guess I can say where you can see, yeah, there's parts of the second one that are more acceptable, but the stupidity level is so high, and just the fact that it was already a dead horse that they keep beating and beating and beating, there was no fixing it at that point. They had already broke it. And you're kind of running into the same thing here with the DC universe. There's not many more chances they're going to get to fix this. They've had so many chances now already we've given them, and Suicide Squad can't even really count because that had barely anything to do with the rest of the universe to this point. We're talking about the main people here, and when Man of Steel was kind of received, and BVS was just like, the loudest movie ever on the internet probably, to where you had two different sides just going at it head to head. And I think you're right, just to bring it back around to that's another reason where there's a lot of people I think are just fed up with it at this point and will turn away from Wonder Woman because they're sick of it. They're sick of the DC fanboys. They're sick of the arguments. They're sick of all the bullshit. They're sick of, the trailers looking good, but the movie not living up to it. They're sick of, how do you fuck up these characters over and over again? How do you fuck up a movie like Batman v Superman? It's really easy to make. Why? Why is it so difficult? Why? Because you tried to overcomplicate it. That's why. And you gave it to somebody who couldn't handle it. And he had way too many ideas and too big of a vision for one film. When you're trying to
a very ambitious film. I'll give it that. It was extremely ambitious.
Right. Especially when you're trying to build a platform to build off of. It's almost like trying to build a skyscraper on top of a house. It makes little sense when you're trying to do. They should have never took that leap, or at least if they were going to do it, Batman v Superman should have been just that. And I think this is kind of what Amy Theist was saying the other night too, is why did it have so much of this other shit in it? Why? Because, and this is something that several people have said, and I totally agree, it was a fucking 2.5 hour commercial for Justice League is what it was.
Commercial for Justice League, the Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman.
Whatever you want to put in that sentence, that's what it was. A big ass commercial, and that's the problem. It should have been about taking Superman to that next level and introducing this older, gruffer Batman into the world. Other than that, you didn't need anything else. You could have hints, but it was just, and the way all that was presented was dumb. And I just got into an argument last week with somebody, and it didn't take me long to shut him up because I said something about a joke about, did Lex Luthor Jr. design that too? About some logo. And then some guy said, you've seen the logo, that's why I got it. And I said, well, does that explain the Flash? And one of the other ones I mentioned, and they just shut up because they couldn't. It's like, duh. It's like it's that same thing with TMNT where it's that adrenaline button, or, Bebop and Rocksteady turning into a warthog and a rhinoceros just because fuck logic. There's a big button that says it don't matter, just move along. No, those things do matter, and that's what Batman v Superman is full of. Moments like that to where it's like, just don't worry about this, look over here, don't worry about this, that's, we'll fix that later. But that's the thing, is Batman v Superman was supposed to fix the problems of Man of Steel. It didn't. It made them worse. I have a feeling Justice League is going to do the same exact thing. Justice League is supposed to fix
the diminishing returns,
right? And Wonder Woman is just its own thing, and that's why I think it doesn't matter if it plays or doesn't play. It could tank and still be a good movie, like you said. And the only thing that's going to do is help Justice League, because if the movie comes out, it will come out on video just before Justice League comes out. And if the movie is good and people finally see it, they might gain a little bit of interest back into this galaxy. But the problem is once they get there, they're going to realize, we're back to this shit again. And that's my fear too. And I think that's what you're getting at, is we're going to see basically Man of Steel Part 3 or Batman v Superman 2 Man of Steel Part 3 is
it's
what
just
going to
be the same thing,
yeah,
pretty much, with just more characters.
Basically, and like you said, CGI action, just explosions and everything. That's all the trailers have been so far for the most part. The only good parts have been the quiet scenes, like when Affleck confronts Aquaman for the first time. Shit like that. And that's the stuff that people have gravitated towards, not all the other stuff. Yeah, I've heard a few people say, oh, this is cool and that was cool. But I've heard more people go, ugh, and facepalm the fact that you got Aquaman riding on the goddamn Batmobile. It's just shit like that Snyder's going to do. I think that's going to just piss off and turn away the rest of the fans. And I think, unfortunately, the fear we have is that this is going to definitely be the death nail for DC for many years to come, except for Batman.
Yeah, and we mentioned this before in our previous podcast. We have people with this theory. What they could be doing is seeing if they can probably at least soft reboot it within the Batman universe, and that very well could be possible. I could see them trying to do that. Kind of like they did with Deadpool. Deadpool was a very specific niche example. I think a better example, actually, kind of a little bit Logan in a sense. It's kind of weird to explain, but where you look at the way they did the movie, they really reinvented the character, or really allowed the character to be the definitive version of Wolverine, or at least Hugh Jackman's
what we've
version
wanted
of Wolverine.
all these years, yeah.
That was so separate from what it was in the other previous two, trying to be more like a typical, Bryan Singer thing. I think the second one was definitely better. The second one was decent. The first one was a complete disaster. But, you got the definitive version. They could be doing the same thing here. We don't know.
Well, and I'm going to pull something out of my ass now, and this is something I heard on the deep, dark internet, and I didn't even bring it up to you because I don't know. There's a theory, and I'm not even going to get too much into it. I just want to hear how you take it. Like I have a feeling you're going to take it the same way I did, but there's a theory that Ben Affleck is going to have his Batman killed, and whoever it is, Armie Hammer or whatever, they were talking for Nightwing.
Armie Hammer.
Was it? Okay. Then that's what it said. They said they're going to introduce him as Nightwing, and then he's going to take over as Batman in the soft reboot, and that's why they're pushing Batgirl, Gotham City Sirens, and that's why all these other movies are getting pushed to the back burner, like Justice League 2 and The Flash, because if shit hits the fan, that's the plan. I don't know, or maybe Ben Affleck's going to die in Justice League 2 or something like that. They're trying to find a way to get Ben out of the world because he wants out, and that's the other rumor I keep hearing, is that Armie Hammer might be our next Batman.
I think there very much could be a possibility. I know there were some rumors saying that it could have been that he could have been Green Lantern. I think that's a possibility because it kind of slipped on him with
and I could be totally wrong. This is a complete
Henry
rumor.
Cavill. Right, yeah.
Complete rumor. Nothing.
If it is true that he could be Green Lantern, we don't know that. And again, what Justice League was really just making me question is that it seems like they're saying, oh, Green Lantern's in the movie, but then he's not in the movie. But then Superman's in the marketing for it. You even notice how like a year ago at Comic-Con he was in the marketing, and then he was largely absent, and then all of a sudden now out of nowhere, like that one picture they had in the promo with the coming soon, where you could tell they just copy paste from a completely different shot.
Right.
They placed him inside the line. I mean, it looks so out of place because they seem like they don't know what they're doing. they keep going, retracting their ideas.
I think they're
going
trying
back
to
and
hide
forth,
Superman,
trying to
but I don't know if we're going to see him that much in this movie. That's the other thing. I have a feeling that he's really going to show up like almost like Luke Skywalker at the end, and we're lucky if we get 2 or 3 words out of him. He might show up just in time to save the day, and that's it. And it's probably going to be the black suit Superman with the long hair and all that crap, because I think that's what it's going to be, and that's why they've been hiding him. I'm not sure where this is going anymore. I mean, I've come to a point where I'm even wondering how much Henry Cavill is even interested in this anymore, because I'm sure he gets a lot of flack. And it's got to build on people after a while. And I mean, Affleck, unfortunately, the absolute opposite has happened to him, to where he's had majority of the people back him up now, as opposed to before, and say, hey, you're the best thing about this now. And at the same time, he's dealing with so much shit in his personal life and from the studio that it's beating him down. And what happened with him with Live by Night and everything like that, it just makes you wonder how much he really even he just wants to walk away from this, if there's any truth to this or not. Like I said, it's a complete rumor.
I think there is. I know. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I know we talked about this before, where John Campea was the first to break this. And like I said, John Campea knows some people. I've seen some of the stuff he says does come true. I think there is a chance that Ben Affleck was like, look, I got so much crap going in my life right now. Then I got this whole thing where the DC seems like it's falling apart. Why should I have any freaking part of this? I think that's what he's thinking about in his head. He's like, why the heck should I be a part of this if it's not even panning out, if it's not even working for me.
Right.
I'm just gonna it's gonna be Daredevil all over again. He doesn't want that.
And I think
career.
I think basically to break it down like this, I think this is kind of what happened. But just all his personal life stuff aside, even though that was going on at the same time and didn't help, I think they kept pressuring him. We want our script. We want our script. We need a Batman movie. We need it now. We need it now. Because there was this, aura of that, and you could kind of tell, especially, in that Jimmy Kimmel interview, even though
he's like,
I'm gonna
no
direct,
one wants to see my Live by Night, but everyone wants the Batman.
Everybody keeps talking about the fucking Batman. You could tell, even though he's joking, and I've seen Ben Affleck in many, many situations and heard him in many, many commentaries and been following him since the days of Kevin Smith. I felt a lot of aggression in the way he was acting, and I know when he's saying something like that, it really did get to him, is what I'm getting to in a roundabout long freaking way.
I could think tell. You're right about that, Tom. Mm-hmm.
I could tell there was something going on behind the scenes that he just fucking threw his hands up in the air and said, fuck it, you guys figure it out. Because the rumor was, they liked the Batman script. Well, then why are you rewriting it? Then why weren't you got Matthew Vaughn to direct? Okay, well, why is it that he has to direct? Is Ben Affleck still going to be involved? What is the deal here? Because you and I both know that Ben Affleck is more than capable to take this on.
Of course.
Professionally.
I think his Batman movie would be legendary. And I'll say this too. There was a saying that I heard from somebody basically saying that nothing is a joke, where usually sometimes, even though someone is joking about something, there is this underlining undertone of actually being true, but just having a comedic spin with it. And even as he said it, I can tell there was, like you said, there was an underline of aggression and frustration. Right. Where he's like, no one wants to see my passion project. Everyone just wants to see the Batman. What about me? What about Ben? I'm trying to,
right.
Argo was great, but no one wants to see this. And I think that had to do mainly with, I think the marketing wasn't that good for it. I think there was other couple of issues I had. Of course, the movie wasn't that well received either. But I think that really struck his confidence. And then he's like, okay, I got a great script together, and you're still not satisfied with it. And it's kind of like this thing where they may not have been satisfied with it. They may very well.
I think that was just
more.
I don't believe that either.
The rushing.
I don't think it was ready, because he basically said that in so many words, and I'm sure that's what it boiled down to. I think you're right, is that he felt the script was not ready, because he flat out said, I'm not going to make a Batman movie that is not, I don't feel confident in making. And I see the type of person, and you're right. It could even be very much that it could have been a combination of both. It could have been partially his ego did take a big hit when it came to Live by Night, and he got scared, or Warner Brothers got scared, because there's 2 movies in a row where, even though The Accountant did fairly well, it didn't do by their expectations. And we brought this up before, not to repeat ourselves, but at the same time, Live by Night took a big dump. And this is a studio that's had a lot of hurt lately, and they shouldn't be. And that's a telltale sign of what's going on in the studio, and that's what scares a lot of us to bring it back around with Justice League and these big movies, is they're not getting the care and attention they should be. And the reason is because you have so much shaking up going on inside. You have chickens with no heads running around, and that's basically what this place is. You got Kevin Sujihari, who's just like, hey kids, how you doing? And then just takes off and doesn't do anything. I'm sure he does whatever he does, but he takes no real responsibility for anything, it seems like, in the press. They have a shit publicity department. And then, like we brought up before a couple times, even though Jeff Johns is supposed to be their face, where the fuck is he? I see Kevin Feige, who has to be the hardest working man in Hollywood right now, all the time in interviews. I don't see Jeff Johns anywhere. I could hardly even, I know what he looks like, but I don't see him taking any responsibility. I don't see him coming out and talking about any of this shit with any of the fans. Kevin, my point I'm getting around to, and not to try and start a fight with the whole DC thing, is that though Kevin is out there interacting with the fans, even though we know he's a very busy man. This man is producing, how many movies at once, in charge of this whole big universe, but yet he takes the time to make sure that things do not get out of hand anymore like they used to when Perlmutter was involved. Maybe that's what they need, is either to give Jeff Johns a lot more power or find somebody else, because Snyder's not it. They don't have any leader there. I don't see anybody coming up and stepping up and saying, look, this is what's going on. That's just bullshit. At least Kevin Feige will come out and do that. Oh no, that's just fucking rumors. Don't listen to that shit. At least he comes out and he says it. It doesn't take long for them to, I'm trying to think of the last time we had something to do with Marvel where it took them, it was like this big of a deal, like with this Diane Lane situation. I don't think they've had one since way back in the day of trying to think of the last time. You know, that's just it. It's like last time I can think of is probably Iron Man 2, or maybe just recently Iron Man 3 when the actress spoke out about them changing her part from being the actual villain in the film. That's the last time I can ever think of anything that even was remotely close to the kind of
definitely
damage
I
basically that's coming out of the situations here at DC.
You know, I just keep thinking, you know, because we keep talking about you know DC and all that, and as I think it becomes more apparent that they really have no direction. This is really this whole universe from its inception has been a very on the fly thing.
Oh yeah, very reactionary.
It has been okay, let's try this. Oh, this doesn't work. Oh,
it's not a bad thing per se, but at this point it is. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Really, I mean, like the whole thing with Feige and all that. You know, of course, we don't worship about the Ultra Feige, but we're just saying he knows what he's doing, and Warner Brothers needs that right now.
He's seen there was a problem. He spoke to Bob Iger about it. They nipped it in the bud. You know, if Jeff Johns really had that much power, he'd be nipping all this shit in the bud. And I don't see it. It's not. It's
and Shuja is like a ghost. I mean, actually, more so Jeff Johns is a ghost. Shuja is kind of like you said. He's just like, oh, hey, what's up? I'm gonna write some checks and stuff like that. Where I remember a couple years ago, like again, I mentioned this before, where they were announcing this whole slate of DC movies. And then after that, he's just been like, he saw how everything turned out to be a train wreck, and he's just like, oh, I'm gonna back away now and just not do anything. Just kind of went away.
It's a very scary situation when you have these characters that we care so much about, and we're seeing such a careless situation like Warner Brothers and DC has had as of late. And as reactionary as they are, and I'm glad they're listening to us, they still have, the biggest problem I think we've touched on, and that's the big thing, is there is no leadership whatsoever over there, and nobody's taking the reins, nobody's taking responsibility besides Zack Snyder, and he's the one guy nobody wants to hear from anymore. And I think that's kind of the thing that they're even kind of probably getting that vibe too, but
they're trying to push him out. I can tell that they're desperately want to take him out.
That's what I'm saying. I think they put a lot of stock in this guy, and I don't know how much control he really has, or contracts or whatever, but like you said, I have a feeling it seems like up until just the last couple of weeks here with Wonder Woman, they seem to have kept him out of the press. And then just to kind of touch on something else here, because, and this is why we keep talking about DC, is because they keep winding up in the news. He turned around and already announced they're ready to film Wonder Woman 2. It's like,
yeah, that's also seemed odd. It was like the thing where like Lionsgate was like, we're gonna have 6 Power Ranger sequels, and all of a sudden the movie completely bombs, and they're like, silent. It's crickets.
And that to me,
and I'm like, you have like they're saying we're gonna have another Wonder Woman movie, and it's just like, wait until the first one does well, if it does.
That is one of the biggest taboos in Hollywood until recent years for some reason, and I don't know why it came back, but I'm sure if you've seen any movies like, Masters of the Universe, that has the infamous ending where Skeletor pops up and says, I'll be back, and that was a common thing in the 80s where for some reason they had this feeling these movies were going to be big hits and they were going to definitely get sequels, and they didn't. And now we're in a point where they banked 6 movies ahead, like you just said, and we know now that chances of another Power Rangers movie, at least in the incarnation that we've seen already, is very slim. Why are you doing this? This is a bad idea. Don't be announcing shit before you know what you've got. And they keep backing themselves into a corner with Warner Brothers and DC doing that over and over and over again since day one. Because it was supposed to be Man of Steel 2, Flash, Wonder Woman, and then Batman and all this kind of stuff before they did a Justice League movie. Then they changed their plan, and then they're changing it again. And like we said before, I really think they have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C at this point. And if one thing or another falls into one place or the other and doesn't happen, like if Wonder Woman and Justice League fail, they might just reboot it with the Batman. I think we might be right about that, and that's the only reason I buy any kind of stock in that rumor I heard. To have somebody like Zack Snyder to come out and say something like that is just pretentious and preposterous at the same time, because don't tell me Warner Brothers doesn't know how we feel about him. And yes, there's so many of them that they feel the opposite, where they hold him up like he's Jesus, and we've gotten into that conversation before too, but I have a feeling we won't be hearing much from Mr. Snyder after Justice League if it doesn't.
After Justice League, I don't think he will.
I think
we'll end it on there.
Yeah,
on
I think you got a good point there. We're gonna just take it in. I want to thank you for joining me again on the Film Buffet podcast, and again, of course, we'll see you next week on this, and hopefully, we'll get a chance to hear the other podcasts that we've been talking about here. I'll make sure to get the links down below as soon as they're up. And thanks again for joining me today, Beyond the Blizz.
Yeah, no problem. It's good to be here, Tom. I always like to be part of the Film Buffet podcast.
All right. Thanks again, guys.